Welcome to the TK423 podcast, where we're going to talk anything and everything about Star Wars. And I am so excited to finally start this journey and spread my love and passion for Star Wars, because in reality, it got started for me at a very young age. Our father taking me and my brother to see the prequels in the movie theaters, getting to experience that as a young kid, going in blindly, not knowing what to expect, and then coming home and then watching the original trilogy. I mean, it was just spectacular. And, to this day, again, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. Huge. Huge. And it's not just a series of sci-fi film and sci-fi content. It's part of a lifestyle that, Star Wars fans alike can relate to. And I have brought so many new people into my life via Star Wars. I've connected with so many people in my life via Star Wars. I've had a lot of ups and downs with Star Wars, but you know what? At the end of the day, Star Wars is here to give us something that nothing else can. And we're going to have our opinions. People are going to agree. People are going to disagree. People are going to scold you. So be it. It's the beauty of Star Wars fandom at the end of the day. A lot of people hate Star Wars fandom. A lot of people understand Star Wars fandom. But it's okay to have your own opinion. Just be ready to go to freaking war for it. And that's what I love about Star Wars. So, without further ado, let's get this first series going. So, the first series of this podcast and channel is going to be centered around the ranking of the 11 Star Wars films, starting with the worst, number 11. So, let's get this show underway.
So what I told you was true, from a certain point of view.
Alrighty. So, like I said, we're going to be doing rankings, starting with 11. And you know what? I'm just going to dive into it. Number 11 is Rise of the Skywalker. And I know there are going to be some people that disagree. There's going to be a lot of people that agree. But Rise of the Skywalker and what it did to the Skywalker saga, what it did to the sequel trilogy, is unfathomable. Because when you look at how The Force Awakens came up, and we'll get to that later on in the rankings, and then how it transitioned to The Last Jedi, and then JJ took the helm back at The Rise of Skywalker, you expected, things to be a little jumbled, right? You expected things to be a little murky, and, that's fine. That can be adjusted. But what Rise of the Skywalker did, starting off in the beginning with reintroducing Palpatine and, the voices going through Kylo Ren's head, which, was cool. But you can't just pop that up out of nowhere. Granted, yeah, Snoke died pretty easily in The Last Jedi. Almost too easily, right? JJ probably used that and said, you know what? What powerful being can die that easily? Being so oblivious to his surroundings, he didn't notice the lightsaber right there turning. He couldn't read Kylo's mind after being in Kylo Ren's mind the entire film, the entire sequel trilogy. He was in Kylo Ren's mind. But then all of a sudden, He wasn't. Again, saving that for The Last Jedi when it comes. But in order for JJ to introduce Snoke as a clone, that had to have happened. You know, Snoke had to have seemed so weak that he could get blindsided like that. And that was my first big problem with the film, is bringing back Palpatine just for the sake of the cloning element. And just to kind of save grace with The Last Jedi. Oh, well, it's justifiable because he was a clone. No, that's it's something that big, a villain that big and Palpatine, you can't just bring him back. We got to justify it. So let's bring back Big Palpatine, right? Let's bring him back. No, you can't. You can't do that. Not only does it discredit, I know some people are going to disagree, it discredits Anakin's redemption in Return of the Jedi. It does. I don't care what you say. It does. Because Anakin brought balance to the Force. He overthrew the Emperor, literally yeeted him, and saved the galaxy beside his son, Luke. And so when The Rise of Skywalker starts off with that, automatically discrediting, Anakin's redemption, just to give some sort of redemption to Kylo Ren and Rey, or like a save the day kind of thing for Rey and a redemption for Kylo Ren. It just didn't. It didn't sit right with me. It didn't sit right with a lot of people, and it's also one of those things where why not create a new villain if instead of leaning on the whole cloning aspect, with Snoke, you could have just had it to where someone else was cloning him using, the technology from, ancient Kamino, basically at that time, to clone Snoke. It didn't have to be the Emperor. And not to mention, when you see those thousands of Star Destroyers, not ships, not like fighter ships, not cruisers, Star Destroyers rising up. Where was the Resistance when all of that was being built? Where, I'm just trying to wrap my head around it still. It's the Rebel Alliance found out that they were creating the word got out that the Empire was creating a weapon called the Death Star. Okay? Word got out. And so what really gets me is, how did word not come out about thousands and thousands and thousands of Star Destroyers getting built?
Bruh.
By the First Order, who the Resistance was pretty well acquainted with, So, I don't know. That mixed with Finn's character going completely down the drain. Throwing Lando Calrissian in the show. Granted, it was nice to see him fly again, but his introduction into the movie it just didn't make sense. Didn't fit Lando's persona. And then, the fake Chewbacca death, the big gasp. Oh my God, Rey just killed Chewbacca. And then a couple of scenes later, Rey finds out Chewbacca wasn't dead. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. So I just shot lightning out of my fingers for nothing. Just to show that I'm a Palpatine.
Bruh.
Come on. Don't even get me started on that. We'll get to that, but not yet. So, when you look at The Rise of Skywalker as a whole, right, especially when you compare it to the other films, what The Rise of Skywalker accomplished in terms of visual effects was good. I'm not denying that. As a sci-fi film, it was a pretty good looking film. But from a story point, from a character progression point, from a plot point, it missed big time. And I'm not alone in thinking that. I know that. But when you take characters like Finn and ruin them, you take characters like Rey and unnecessarily beefing them up to where she can kill the Emperor. That survived, okay? That survived. Had all the power of the Sith in him, and she had all the power of the Jedi in her, and she killed him. And then Rey proceeds to die. Valiant death. Sacrifice to save the galaxy. Right? Right. And then Kylo Ren not ever showing that he could force heal, which you saw Rey do it earlier in the film, right? She's been training. She could force heal. It's a pretty basic force skill, okay? Trust me, I've tried it. It's basic. But for Kylo Ren to do that, basically transfer his life essence into Rey, that didn't make a lot of sense to me. I understand that he was trying to save the day, and he felt like Rey deserved to live more than he did, even after redeeming himself. You know, just didn't make sense. The film is called Rise of the Skywalker. The only person on screen that had Skywalker blood was Leia, briefly, when she passed away. And Kylo Ren. And I don't want to hear the ridiculous argument. Oh, well, Rey was adopted. By who? But I mean, really, by who? Like, she went to Tatooine. Okay. Went to the home. Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen. And basically buried Anakin's lightsaber and Leia's lightsaber in the sand. Then you see Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, Luke, and Leia as Force ghosts. And they give him a nod. Or they give her a nod. And the old lady's like, who are you? I'm Rey. Rey Skywalker. I'm like, oh, dear Lord. Have mercy. No, that's not how it works. I'm sorry. You had the grandson of Darth Vader. And then you had a Palpatine. How can a Palpatine be the last Skywalker? Tell me that. How can the dude responsible, other than Mace Windu, but that's just a joke, But how can the dude, Emperor Palpatine, how can he be connected to Rey to where she's a Palpatine, right? And then Rey just become a Skywalker. How? No. You don't just change your lineage in Star Wars like that. You don't. Even Leia was an Organa. She was raised as an Organa. Luke was raised as Luke Skywalker. Okay? All right. Okay? And I don't know how much more I need to say this. Rey doesn't have Skywalker blood. You can't just be adopted, okay? Even when you look at things like Grogu and Din Djarin, okay? Grogu gets formally adopted as Din Djarin's son. Okay? Or child. Right? And that is what adoption looks like in Star Wars. Okay? You don't just get a nod from a Force ghost. Oh! That was a nod. I'm a Skywalker now. No. That's not how it works. Not how it works. I'm sorry. You know, it would have been a perfect way to end that movie and that trilogy in the Skywalker saga. Well, Skywalker saga, you could have just stopped at Return of the Jedi. Because that was a perfect ending in itself. But a good way to have ended Rise of Skywalker, which would have made that film, which kind of would have resurrected that film a little bit to where it would have been pushed up in this ranking, is... Okay, just picture this for me. All right, I got two things. No, you know what? I got three different outcomes. But the third outcome, you would have had to change things in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. So, first one. Rey would have died like she did. Kylo Ren would have honored her, taken her back to the Resistance, and pay respects to his mother. And then he would go to Tatooine, where his grandfather once lived, where his grandfather broke out of slavery from Qui-Gon, won himself freedom. Okay? And it would have been the rise of a Skywalker. He was born a Solo by name, right? Okay? His mother was a Skywalker just as much as Luke was. Okay? Blood, right? Blood. Leia wasn't adopted into Skywalker. Luke wasn't adopted into the Skywalker. Nobody was adopted into the Skywalker. You're born into it. You're born into it, okay? And so that would have been a good ending. Another good ending I would have accepted was Kylo Ren helps Rey defeat the Emperor. Like, I know he helped, but like, you know how Rey was the one to have the two lightsabers at the end. If they would have both, you know, been right there, you know, pushing on to Mr. Palpatine and killing him, that would have been cool. And then if Kylo Ren would have died from that, right? If he would have died from it, then Rey could have healed him. Because you saw Rey previously heal, right? Use Force heal. It would have made sense, right? Sense. Even with Star Wars, you have to make sense. Canonically, right? Not saying literal sense, like what we're used to, but canonically. And so you could have had that where Rey brings Kylo back and they both live. And you know what? They both go to Tatooine. Oh, wow. And they both pay respects to Leia. Kylo Ren's redeemed. And guess what you get, Disney? Guess what you get? You get a little bit of happier fan base because you didn't kill off Kylo Ren, who was the best character in the entire sequel trilogy, who had the most depth, who had the most background, who made the most sense in terms of canonical stories of Star Wars. And you kill the one guy you actually did good on. Why? I still don't know to this day. But that is why that's why the film ended up being as bad as it did. Now here's the third thing. Here's the third thing that's really interesting. And I could dive more into this thing because it's more of an overall like outcome you could have asked for the sequel trilogy. You know how Finn was starting out having the lightsaber and he wasn't good with it, but he tried, right? He tried, and he wanted to become a Jedi from the looks of it, right? He did. Kylo Ren looked at him in the beginning and was like, "Hey, something weird about you, man. You're probably force sensitive, probably." And then the rest of the film, he holds the lightsaber until the very end when Rey takes it from him. What if Finn and Rey would have been trained by Rey, okay? And then Rey fall in love with Kylo. Finn falls in love with Rey. Finn continues down the Jedi path. Rey joins Kylo, say in The Last Jedi, right? You have a bad guy ending. Rey turns to the dark side. Okay. And then you have this big fight, okay, between Finn, who was trained by Luke, and Rey, who was also trained by Luke. Oh my God, and get this. And Kylo, who's also trained by Luke. And Finn still has Luke in his arsenal, like in his corner. He also has Leia, because at this point, Rey is to the dark side with Kylo. And then it ends with them three having to team up to kill the Praetorian Guards and Snoke. Now, whether who dies, who lives, personally, I would have been okay if that's how everything would have went. I would have been okay with either both Rey and Kylo dying and then Finn being like the one to pass on Luke's teachings, or Rey to have been redeemed and Finn would have been severely hurt and then Kylo would die, or etc., etc. Or, you know what? Throw a bigger monkey wrench into it to where it's a dark side ending. Like, really, if you think about it, you could have had the whole trilogy end in a dark side. I know that's not Star Wars, like, style, but you could have had it to where maybe Snoke turned Finn, and then it kind of turned into, they all just fight to the death. Something like that. Something interesting. Something that you never seen in Star Wars, right? Because Finn as a character, I thought had a lot of really good potential. I was excited. Other than him screaming Rey, but that's not his fault. John Boyega's awesome. Daisy Ridley's awesome. Adam Driver's awesome. They're all great, but the characters, at the end of the day, were not well written. Other than Kylo Ren, but other than his ending. Okay? So, I have the utmost respect for them as actors and actresses, but the writing was horrible. Rise of Skywalker was terrible. and we'll get to the rest of the sequels later on in this ranking. But as it stands, Rise of the Skywalker is number 11 on the list, coming in at last. So, next, we're going to see what's number 10. Next time on the TK423 podcast. So, be sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to drop your comments below. I want to hear what your thoughts are. I want to hear your agreements. I want to hear your disagreements. Scold me if you want. I don't care. This is Star Wars. We're here to talk Star Wars, so let's talk Star Wars. So, see y'all next time for the second installment of this ranking series where we get to see what number 10 is. Everyone, may the Force be with you.